Dylan Williams, thanks very much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, David.
It's always amazing to see people that are in the cyberspace, but also keep with the program, meaning that you turn in from a practitioner, traditional practitioner, to somebody who specializes in LLMs and AI. So why don't you just kind of walk me through memory lane, just so for people that are unfamiliar what you've done and what you're doing today.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, a majority of my security career, if not all of it, has been security operations, right? So, pretty much everything, detection and response, it's your typical blue teaming stuff. So, I work for enterprise security team, for internally for a company, and that's where my specialty lived, right? Most of my stuff was around. And so, probably the past couple years, most of the work's been around detection, writing, research, threat hunting, right? Really cloud native stuff. That's what I found the most fascinating. That's probably one of the newer things that folks in that specialty are exploring right now. Um, but yeah, and then we just passed, I think, the second anniversary of ChatGPT, the Gen AI explosion, right? But yeah, probably a year and a half ago, I had my ChatGPT moment people talk about. I'm sure you're familiar with that, but that was a whole thing for me. But the second piece, I guess, that really got me into the rabbit hole of large language models in general was like bringing that and automating significant portions of your personal life or your professional life. And that's kind of where you see the impact. It doesn't happen like that, right? Um, it's one of those technologies that's more of an art than a science, and it comes with like 6 months of experimenting. Like that's what I think is really cool about this. It's really being a healthy mixture of an engineer but a scientist too, right? With this technology specifically. So yeah, that's how I got from a practitioner to building with LLMs. A lot of the stuff that I talk about is taking that idea and applying it to our domain of cybersecurity, which is like a really unique form of expertise in itself, right? AI has been around for, it could be medical, lawyers, all these high level specialties. But I kind of stick it to our domain. There's so many unique specialties in there that this technology can be used to augment a lot of our skills, right? So that's kind of what I'm working on now. So um, we just started a cybersecurity venture. So I just follow me on LinkedIn. We'll be sharing a lot of stuff what we're doing shortly. Pretty pumped. Um, so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now.
So what attracted you to the kind of the cybersecurity operations center? Was it incidental? You just kind of fell into it. Walk me through like the early journey. And for the people that are not familiar with it, because it's a lot of people want to get into this space, and it's a little bit of an enigma to them. So it's really
Yeah.
interesting, and I feel that the whole LLM space and AI provides an additional opportunity for these people that want to get in because they can specialize in both cyber and the application of AI.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So I started out as an intern in information technology and IT. And I think the story is literally like I saw like credentials go in raw text over the wire, and I was like, "That's wild, man." And I was like, "I gotta see." So that kind of like opened the can of worms for me. I was like, "What's going on here?" Um, but yeah, I mean, if we divvy it up into you got the blue side defense,
But
right?
Dylan,
Red time.
hold on a
Yeah,
second. Do you have inherent curiosity? We always curious? Because I find that's a
yeah.
common thread with a lot of practitioners.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, you could be the type of person you're like, whatever, I saw that, but I was like, don't you want to know how that worked or why someone's password like in clear text over the thing? So yeah, it's totally a curiosity thing, 100%. I think that's a good way, for folks like I'm a big, I think the term is autodidact, but it's just a fancy way of saying like you like to go out on your own and learn and teach yourself things, right? And it's great today, especially overlapping with the whole AI stuff is having YouTube at your disposable on your phone. I mean, there's so much you have accessible to you. And then now having tools with AI, we have such a big lever to like accelerate the rate of learning, or it's just like an access thing, right? So times have changed quite a bit that way. Um, but yeah, I started there, and I think I went totally down the path of I do think certifications do have a certain place at a certain skill level because it's like a really affordable way to get credibility, right? Whether it's on a resume or you just having to chat with somebody, it shows that you care, you're motivated too, right? But yeah, if you this is like you starting fresh out of the cyber field or IT or network in general, I think that's a good starting point, and also will expose you to the whole umbrella of this world, right? And you'll have visibility into all these different specialties, and maybe one will, be pique your interest. Oh, let me go check that out, right? Yeah, yeah.
And there's no excuse today. It seems like, first of all, you've been giving back by contributing information and articles and so on. And it's really interesting because there's no excuse. As you mentioned, a lot of it can be just acquired by going to GitHub, looking at repositories, looking at YouTube videos, Telegram channels. And in fact, now with AI itself, I can go to Anthropic, Claude, or ChatGPT and ask it to teach you cyber or teach you how to do things. It's almost like it's your own personal tutor. There's really no excuse these days to not do it. But yet, some people still looking at, boot camps and so on. You can have Claude run you through a boot camp just by prompting.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's almost to the point where we have the opposite problem, where like you have to start creating an information diet because there's so much stuff out there. It is borderline overwhelming. So, and a big part of that too, I feel like it's becoming difficult to sift good quality stuff from the rest of it. And like I'm totally a victim of, I don't know what that phenomena is. If you have too many choices, like you're going down the grocery store, there's like 70 different cereals. I'm going to be there for hours, man, trying to pick that cereal. So yeah, you gotta, but no, a big part of that
That
I think is
that's why you can't go hungry to the grocery.
right, right.
You
Yeah.
can't go hungry to the
Um,
grocery store.
Exactly. Yes, that's a good hack. Exactly. But yeah, a big part of this is knowing where to go. Like, I totally have 5 to 10 resources that I think are like vetted, reputable, whether it's from people you follow online or you heard through word of mouth, right? Um, as a starting point and going there for learning and stuff. But yeah, there's so much stuff out there. So much stuff.
And and isn't it amazing? Like, I mean, this whole prompting and AI, real AI, not like the one we used to use with quotation mark, right, only like 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago. It's relatively new, but there's still. So first of all, a lot of people say, "Well, I don't know, I don't remember my life beforehand. Like, how did I do my work before using these tools?" And then on the
Yeah.
other continuum scale, there are people that are not embracing it. I mean, how many people do you think use? I mean, there's quite a few, but how many people? Well, I would like reverse question: how many people do not use it on a regular basis and are completely oblivious to the fact that there are tools like this? And what's amazing is the speed of which these tools are getting better and better. I mean, it's 6 months ago, prompting did not give you the same answers it does today. These models
Mhm.
are getting better and better.
Yeah, the
How
rate
many
of
people do you think
change
are
with
not embracing? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's pretty split down the middle. I'd say majority are not, and like we're totally victim of being in our own bubbles of people who are in a technology industry. So we're like learning, touching all this stuff all the time. So it comes very natural to us, right? Like as far as first adopters to this. But I think outside of that bubble, a majority of the world is probably not even privy to this sort of thing. And it's still been 2 whole years after we had LLMs at this caliber come out to the public, right? You have a phone, you got a computer, you can use these things. I don't think it's far-fetched to compare this to when like the internet or the search engine came out, right? I imagine a lot of the same experiences where we have people are like, look at this thing, it's incredible. How are you not using it? And the person to the left or right of you is like, I never heard of it. What are you talking about? And you kind of got to show them. And so you might have this experience with like family or friends, or even at work with my coworkers all the time. I think is the thing, but I think a majority of people are not are very naive to this. We have this piece of technology here that's pretty incredible. So
And and where do you think, at a high level, where's the promise with LLMs to help the defenders in the whole cyberspace?
yeah, I mean, at the same time, I do think there needs to be a healthy dose of skepticism, as with any new technology, right? For us as defenders, I really like to look at it as enabling us to become power users, right? So this could be the blue side, the red side, but I just think it's very equivalent to doing something manually, right? Maybe you're like tailing logs, right? Which everybody used to do before we had all these fancy tools like a SIM or a data lake, right? Um, and then now we have this another piece of technology that's like another
Tailing
abstraction.
log is a term, Dylan, before, because I have to, for these people who are not familiar with it, it basically using, for you it's natural because you're like, but you basically it's a tail command to show, to go back and to see what the last like 50 lines of logs, right?
Yep, yep. Yeah, just manually on the command line. Yeah, you like imagine you have a really large text file and you're just looking at it. Yeah.
These days seems like it's like, who does that today?
Right, right.
It's like it's
You're causing
gone.
you're causing more pain. Yeah, you're causing more pain than good. Yeah.
But then the fast forward, SIM was all the rage. Basically,
Right.
these data lakes storing all that, and then doing commands to extract, I guess, the some of the knowledge associated with it being captured. So operating on that data. So that was all the rage for a little while,
Mhm.
but that didn't
Yeah.
really pan out, I don't think.
Right. Yeah. Like I think we have these new backbone technologies that either make their way from another industry into ours, right? SIM's a great example of, um, and then taking it a step further, like, we have the snowflakes, the Databricks, the warehouses where, I try to keep it simple, stupid. It's like to us as operators, we're doing one thing. We use this tool to interact with the data. That's really it, right? To me, it could be no different if that's my day job, whether it's a data warehouse, a Splunk, a SIM, or some other bespoke thing that you built in your company. Sure. Um, but I think LLMs is a
Elasticsearch,
little
I've
bit,
heard
yeah,
sometimes.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Super popular, super big one. But yeah, the LLM angle for defenders is interesting because it takes a certain level of expertise to know one, if not more, of these tools, right? And there's dozens of them. You could totally, as a defender, be using like easily 10, 15, 20 plus tools on your day to day, depending on your company, how large the organization is, right? But LLMs are a great way. It's like I talk to my buddies about this and compare it to um, you could go, let's say you run into an issue or you have a question you want to work out. You naturally, you're going to go to search engine like Google, right? Maybe browse hours through Stack Overflow, stuff like that on the forums, trying to figure it out. Well, now we have this piece of technology that, listen, they're pre-trained models. There might be some hallucinations. It's not perfect 100% of the time. Absolutely not. But on the other end, we have this thing that I could probably get the answer in less than 5 minutes. Why wouldn't you use that? So I think that we're teetering on that edge of people are going to start to go here, and then I'm sure we'll talk about there's a lot of ways to get around that hallucination problem too, right? But
Yeah, we're going to double click on a lot of the issues that are eventually going to get solved um, with all kinds of other means. But talk to me about, for example, there's tool like Copilot by Microsoft that was supposed to be, again, all the rage, for $25 a month or whatever. It would be like your
mhm.
own personal co-analyst, I would say, right? So you run it, you have a ability to ask the questions, but that really didn't take off as much as people thought, right? I think it had some limitations.
Yeah, yeah, that's been a tough thing. Like a big thing that I try to help people with is to sift kind of the snake oil or a lot of the vendors or extremely large enterprises who have these large flagship products and just slap AI or LLM or Gen AI, whatever, onto the product. Um, yeah, I didn't use Copilot a whole lot. I know that people were not happy with that experience, but yeah, I think it really, you should be skeptical of things that, unfortunately, probably a large portion of the market is people using Chat GPT wrappers or just putting a Gen AI chatbot onto some component of their product. That's cool and all. I think it just comes down to what's the impact? Was it useful for you? Like I'm sure there's a portion of Copilot users out there that were really happy with it, and that's great. Um, but yeah, I think some of the more interesting products out there that are building, LLMs into the product or building around LLMs on a new product, it's going to be a lot about how it incorporates with that person's workflow, right? Like I've been a huge fan of cursors, like an AI IDE, integrated development environment, right? We probably have a lot of folks who use VS Code. They just forked that, and it's like, and that, a lot of the way that we use AI chatbots today, it's a lot of copy and pasting, going back and forth, pictures, screenshots, messaging. The products that I think are interesting, it's going to be bringing that closer to the product that you're using. So like even we talked about the Defender thing. I know there's been a lot of copilots or chatbots like text to a query language, right? To Elasticsearch, to SPL, stuff like that. But yeah, so yeah, I think that the two things that stand out to me, I think about execution around bringing AI to a product. You can call it a copilot, you can call it whatever. Is the user interface and the user experience, I think, are pretty important. And the second, it's the system around the LLMs, which a big part of that is the LLM is not going anywhere. It's going to be part of the software stack probably forever now, right? But it comes with its own uniqueness, own interesting things, right? When you're building around it. But if you nail those two things, I think you're going to set yourself up for success, right? But yeah, I like to think of it as Copilot might be a term that like we have chatbot, now we have Copilot. I do think it makes sense to think of it as like a junior employee, junior analyst, an intern, right? That you can kind of offload or work with a lot of the tasks that you're doing to speed yourself up, increase the quality, consistency, accuracy of your work, right? But yeah, it's a similar thing to like I said earlier, like the search engine or Google, right? Or what are your other go-to tools that you use when you run into issues for your day job, right? You don't have to be a cybersecurity person. It could be any type of job, right?
Yeah, and these tools are getting better and better, and the integration with other tools. So in Anthropic, for example, like they came out with a integration to desktop. So essentially, you can now have a control anything that's on your laptop or desktop
Hmm.
completely natively. So you can essentially have it do your tasks, as you mentioned, workflow automation, where you decide, okay, let me frame it. What do I do on a regular basis, and then let have Anthropic Claude do it for me completely, even using the same enterprise tools or whatever, because it has
Hmm.
access to. Now, I don't know how risky that would be to rely heavily. Maybe you could just have it do it automatically, and you just sit down and say, well, just let me know when you're done, and I'll take a look at it for a few minutes and let it run in the background. But essentially, you can automate a lot of this work. Don't you think that essentially eventually we'll get rid of all the analysts and have it, if the engine is good enough, and we remove some of the limitation from hallucinations and some of the things that's not correct, then we'll eventually will be completely automated.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was Google put out this paper or this guide on the levels of autonomy with respect to LLMs. And I know people compare it a lot to like there's the five levels of autonomy for self-driving vehicles or cars, right? But they basically started with assistant, right? It's kind of like how we use ChatGPT or Claude today, right? And then more to like a co-pilot or semi-autonomy, right? Semi. And then the last step would be full autonomy, right? There's no humans in the loop. It's going to do it autonomously, whatever way it thinks best to complete the task. I think we're for most tasks, especially in cyber, that it's a high impact, high risk environment. We're probably not going to see that for a while. I don't think human in the loop is going to go away for a while, and I think that's great too. And even Langchain has a great article where they talk about human on the loop, and it's like imagine there's all the LLMs doing all these tasks for us, right? But we're going to pick and choose where does a human expert come in and approve or deny or review and change the work product that the LLM's making for us, right? Just like you would do it with a coworker or an employee, right? I think that's a great way to think about it. Is the difference between now and 5, 10 years from now is we might have a lot of this work being done behind the scenes, the heavy lifting's done by the LLM, but at certain points we'll have a human on the loop. So like imagine you're a cybersecurity defender, you're an analyst, you have a really complex task, maybe it takes you an hour, it's 20, 30 different tools or steps. I think a significant portion of that will be automated, but it's going to be up to us to strategically pick which ones we want to have a human, and the task can't finish until we go in and say yes or no. But I think that healthy mixture, that's the orchestration of that, is going to be pretty critical. But yeah, I think of it more as getting augmented. It's a humans plus AI, not one or the other. And I don't think it's going to be one or the other for a really long time. Yeah.
And let's talk a bit about the limitations today with these LLMs. So first and foremost, I just saw a couple of weeks ago there's a quote from Snowflake CEO say that these LLMs are 5% wrong, and the issue is we don't know which 5% that is. So that's number one. Number two, they're fairly slow. A lot of time it takes. When I say slow, it might take 20, 30 seconds for a query, and depending on what it is you're doing, maybe if you need like automatic detection, it's too slow for that. Secondly, from an energy consumption, I made a comment to a LinkedIn post, and somebody still, like, immediately went on my tail saying that, oh, we shouldn't worry about the green planet, when it comes to progress. And I said my response was, well, I don't necessarily. I mean, I'm all for green, but it's not about that. It's about the inability for us to support these massive operations. Hence Google investing in nuclear power. So there's quite a few, and then the context, right? So meaning that you don't have enough context associated with it. So this LLM have a certain capacity to ingest, the type of information. So that's also limited in nature. You cannot, potentially, ingest tens of thousands of data points. So there's quite a few of these limitations right now for the technology. So I have another follow-up question to that, but let me kind of let it linger for a second.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, if we look at the rate of change that's happened since, was it GPT 3.5 came out 2 years ago, right? The models are clearly getting marginally better, faster. And when I say better, that's pretty ambiguous, but we could say like the quality and accuracy of the results are better. The odds of it hallucinating are going down, right? That's what we define as better for us, right? I know recently I've seen a lot of people talk about plateaus, technological plateaus. Yeah, I won't
Dylan,
speak
you
too much.
beat me to it. I was about to, but I was about to not stop you because you were on a roll. But thank you
Yeah,
for bringing this up.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, maybe you can educate me. I don't know like too much about the devils in the details, so to speak, of
I,
what
I
that
think
means, but it's like
I
any other
think it just
technology, right?
Yeah, I think it was due to the fact that there's limitations associated with the number of the size of the model. It doesn't grow when you do to infinity, and then it gets exponentially better.
Hmm.
There's a certain plateau, meaning that there's if you go to several billion data points or artifacts, and then if you go to several billion times 10, it doesn't the model has become 10x better. So I think
Right,
that's
right.
where the limitations are.
Yeah, so I can't speak to, I don't know. I mean, I think humans are notoriously bad at predicting technology in general. So I don't think this is going to be any different from that. Who knows if, the next 5 years are going to be insane, or it's just going to be, Claude 3.6 will be a little bit better. But I mean, we're in a place where the technology, for my, anecdotes, is pretty incredible already. Like I think a lot of people are really, really happy, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be just the models getting better, faster, stronger. I think it's really going to be an engineering developing thing. It's like the models are already so, so, so good. It's going to be people who have spent and done the homework and spent so much time understanding the minutia of building a product or a system around it. And I think it's going to be most of that, doing that really, really well is going to bring up the bar super, super high, even if the model hasn't gotten a little bit better. Does that kind of make sense? That's where I think it might be interesting. Yeah.
And now you're seeing there's a lot of promise in using RAG, multi-agents, agents. There's quite a few startup actually that are looking at automating SOC, threat management by using LLMs, but in the agent factor, meaning that they're running parallel, and then using RAG to automate some of the data ingestion and so on. What's your take on that direction in the market?
Yeah, I guess we can totally compare it to different levels of automation, right? So in this case, if we pick on alert triage, right, which is just like a human's job as an analyst, is they get a batch of alerts every day, and they're supposed to label them, investigate them as benign or bad. It needs to be escalated, right? And when we consider that like the low hanging fruit, more or less, is, and when I say that, I mean with respect to the time and the effort and the level of expertise required to do that job. I think that's a really natural, good starting point. But if we go back and look at our initial attempts to automate this, right, could be basic scripting, like, I'm a human having to manually go and do these things to figure out if the alert is good or bad. That's still meaningful. It saved me time. It did things correctly as I would, right? We can measure that too. But yeah, I think starting there, and then we get into SOAR playbooks. I think a lot of folks probably have already achieved the level of automation that a lot of the AI SOC tools will have. That's not everybody, but these are people who've been doing it for years and are already really, really good at it. But that's not to say that uh, you know introducing AI as a means for automation can have the same efficacy, if not better. I think that's totally doable, but I think it just comes down to um, evaluations. Like we have, 3 or 5 team of analysts. It takes them this long to triage these alerts, and percentage of them were accurate or not, right? Having those numbers, and I think a really cool way to compare it to the AI or the autonomous SOC tools out there is they'll do like a retrospective, so go back a year worth of the alerts that a human expert has already triaged, and just look at the results. And I feel like it's going to be difficult for somebody to say, hey, we can triage 50, 60, 80% of your alerts with the same efficacy as your team, if not better. I mean, that's a win-win. That's a great, and that's not talking about the accepting that risk of, we're talking about full autonomy now as opposed to semi-autonomous. But I think, yeah, it's going to be just measuring the impact. Try to be objective about it, but like when looking at these sorts of tools, whether it's in the SOC or other parts of security, right? I know a big popular one now is for the GRC folks. Trust is like they have a lot of controls, long list of controls and questionnaires they have to fill out and stuff, right? Um, I think of it as like a kind of like a 3D box, and one angle we have complexity, or a better way to put that is like requisite subject matter expertise. So like that would be lower for like a tier one analyst in a SOC versus like a tier three, five, whatever you want to call it. Um, that's one, and then labor, like how much labor is it costing you resource wise? Like, is it taking hours and hours and hours per human, per team, per day for this function, this capability in your org? And the last is speed or cost, really, right? Sorry, no, I think what was I trying to say? Risk or impact. So like if you think that in a 3D box, I think a large portion of that is really good opportunity for using this technology to automate. But you got to pick along those axes where you feel comfortable, with the risk and the impact, right? So like one, I think good compromise is like the triaging the low hanging fruit, typically more low risk activities might be really, really good for an LLM to step in and do it autonomously, if not fully autonomously. But the higher you go and the risk, we're just going to loop humans in appropriately. But that all goes back to that idea of us being AI with humans augmenting each other's work, right? But yeah, I think that's probably a good way to start to think about it. Yeah.
And it seems like there's a whole new area of cyber now, which is the protection against LLM poisoning and be able to put some guardrails around AI. It's super interesting because again, coming back to the limitation of these models, there's a lot of time cases where we don't know who actually trained the model. We don't know it's very much like a black box. There's no explainability. So
Mhm.
explainable AI and transparent AI is something that a lot of companies are struggling with. So what's your take on that in terms of be able to A, understand what the model did, B, making sure that the model is not biased due to the either training or poisoning or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think that's the best way to go about it is we need to have explainable and transparent AI that makes the people who are using it way more comfortable. That shouldn't be the only reason. It's because we just want to see the LLM is a black box, right? And a lot of these products that go off that model is they might have AI somewhere in there. I'm putting information in, I'm getting it back. Like show me your work. It's just like a human, right? We're just automatically trusting that the work product that comes out of it is good or okay, but we should always have the opportunity to open up and take a look, right? Um, I think, yeah, explainable and transparent, that's the way to go. I think the best way to go about this is to have, quality assurance. It might be, a very mundane feel. I know people like to say that QA, but it's like totally necessary for so many things. It's so important. And I think a great way to put this is like when you vet or hire people for your team, you're trusting them to do the job up to a certain standard. And I think we can borrow some concepts for that for when we're incorporating AI into these workflows, right? But a big part of that is like show me your work always, or give me the option to go in and take a look, right? Hopefully as granular as we can get, right? Um, yeah.
And should somebody, let's say you're running a stock and you're as an MSSP or as a company, should you just wait for some of the existing tools to just slap on AI on top of that? I'm assuming that there's quite a few EDRs and in SIM and whatever tools. I mean, everybody's adding AI capabilities. So maybe as a practitioner, you just have to kind of stay back and wait for it. But you don't have to do anything.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be like any other technology. If we like pick on EDR vendors, right? Endpoint protection. In the early days, it was just even before EDR, AV like signature based, right? And then they moved to more fancy stuff, so to speak, like heuristics or pattern matching. And then when EDR came out, we get full blown machine learning. But it's just a different means to an end of surfacing alerts, right? But I think the whole point is, regardless of what vendor you are, this new technology comes out, everybody starts adding ML. Or if you're in the SIM, everybody started doing risk-based alerting or user behavior analytics. Same concepts, right? Everybody's going to start adding LLMs, whether it takes the form of a copilot or a chatbot, we'll see. But I think some of the most valuable stuff is you got to ask yourself, it's still going to be siloed to that one tool. I think some of the stuff that we've seen that is a real pain is like I mentioned earlier, the average defender has probably got 10, 20, 30 tools, right? Well, now I have 10, 20, 30 AIs. It's not really helpful. So I think you should come at it from an angle of, is it more impactful for you to spend the time or effort to go procure a product or tool or research and build it yourself? That is really more of an augmenting thing, right? Because the value to me is like um, one use case is I have all these different tools, these different steps that I have to do, right? Having a one central place, which I think is a really good candidate for AI to help out because that's what it's really good at, right?
Yeah, maybe like a AI orchestration tool. I don't know if you've seen that video of this. I think it was a airport robot that went
Yes.
ahead and convinced all the other robots to quit their
Yeah.
jobs. So something like that, but on the positive side, where it would be like the
Right.
orchestration of all the other tools. Just tell them, hey, we got to step it up and figure out
Yeah. Yeah.
how do we make this better. Maybe there's a startup idea right there.
Right there. Right there. Yeah. If it takes physical form as marketing, I think kudos to you guys. That would get people pretty excited if they saw physical robots walking around using a saw or something. So
So while we're doing this and speaking about the all these AI tools, the adversaries are doing a phenomenal job at embracing the technology. from morphing existing like 0 days to exploiting vulnerabilities to real fake to I mean the list goes on and on and on in terms of how AI has been exploited, and even I think in the nation state level. Meaning, again, to talk about, I don't even know if quantum computing is real. I'm assuming it is, but be able to break encryption. So, what's your take on where things are going on the other side of the aisle?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to a lot of the ethical hacking or red teaming that we do to test our defenses before the bad guys even get a chance to do it. A lot of those tools and techniques and methodologies can get leaked over, or if they're public, a lot of open source tools can be used for bad too. I think it's just like anything else. The difference here, I think, is that AI, Gen AI, this past 2 years is such a powerful lever. It's such a big lever, and I think the rate of change is going to be much greater than some of these than our predecessors, right? And so, if you think about what we can do with LLMs or incorporating them into tools today, why can't a bad guy or a group of bad guys use these? It's absolutely the case, and it's like the barrier to entry has been lowered dramatically. That is why I think this has had so much impact, and why it has
Yeah,
potential for much more impact,
and
right? Like,
Dylan, it started with I think that the original barriers to entry went down. If you remember, they used to talk about script kiddies.
yeah, exactly.
So now it's like LLM kiddies.
LLM Kiddies. Yeah, I don't want to know what that's. Yeah, but think about it. It's like, and people, assume that, a lot of the AI companies like OpenAI and Anthropic have done really, really good job at, and Meta and Llama, really good job of building models that are secure and trusted, and they can't be used for bad reasons, right? That's a whole science in itself. But there's totally ways out there, just like you could
Yeah,
jailbreak or crack software, you could jailbreak or crack an
or
LLM, and exactly. So
yeah, you go to, you download your like local instance, like, using Llama, you install it, and there's a Hugging Face where there's thousands of
mhm.
these models, and you run it, and there's actually some of these models even tell you to begin with that
Mhm.
they don't have any rails.
Yeah, there was, yeah, I mean, I think LLM Kiddies, we're out to see if we can coin that term. I haven't heard that yet, but that's, yeah, like if you can sit at home and you're going to have LLM write polymorphic malware for you, and you don't need to be an expert in malware writing, like, yeah, I mean, we're getting there, right? So there's a really, really wild paper by OpenAI, I think it's from earlier this year or last year, about, they have like these experts come in and red team the model, right? But one of them was like, if you think about it, what's like the real world impact somebody can leverage this thing for bad, right? And we're talking about the inference providers, OpenAI. It's a third party service sitting out on the web. I pay for it, I can use it, right? And now that we're getting into the agentic world, right? I think 2025 is going to be, that's what it's going to be about. We're giving the models access to take action, uh, maybe on behalf of a human or not. But like, we live in the internet age, right? Like the internet is tied to the real world and stuff. But in the paper, they go over, they wanted to test and see, could someone like access, they have these remote wet labs, right, to do experiments, stuff like that. Could you have an AI register and do it? But I mean, it was scary, but it was quite fascinating, because I like think of the lengths that people can go to, how creative they can get with these sort of things, right? So I'll send you that one. That was a really wild paper.
And then on the other side, even like using AI to generate like unbelievable honeypot, like for example, fake worlds. There's just I just saw just the other day like where you take a photo, a two-dimensional photo, and you convert it into a three-dimensional world.
Mhm.
So the possibilities of using AIs are endless, and both from the attacker and the defender. And then, as you mentioned, some of these tools can be exploited in both ways. So red, like a automatic pen tester can be potentially be sold, rebranded and be
Mhm.
sold on the other side. And it reminds me of the good old days of email security years ago, where you used to you used to sell anti-spam engines,
Mhm.
and then the same tool was like a very fast, high frequency, high capacity mailer. So they
Okay, for
were
the yeah, exactly.
the sending span. So in this particular case, you have the automatic pen testing, and then on the other side, you'll have basically just the same tool, but being utilized on completely on the other side.
Mhm. Yeah, like I think um, yeah, it's I think it comes down to just like always, we have to do our best to have a really good understanding of adversary tradecraft. What are they doing? How are they doing it? Right? I don't think it's any different that way than threat intel. It's just that the rate of change is going to be much faster. They have a really powerful tool at their disposal, just like us, right? It's going to make things more difficult, right? I would be curious to know because I haven't looked into this too much. Like you mentioned, our nation state actors, our criminal syndicate groups, are they leveraging AI for their tools? Is it more of an LLM Kiddies thing? I don't know. Like, what's the frequency that people are actually using this in real world attacks? But from what I've seen, there's quite a number of them already that have caused some serious incidents, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely. And then are we risking, creating almost like a monoculture because everybody is using essentially the same LLM tools and the same technology. So you can see today when you receive an email and the first line says, "I hope this email finds you well." It's an indicator that somebody used the
yeah,
LLM
I will
because
open it. Yeah, and I'll open it.
yeah, no, but
Yeah.
but they're using the same. So the reason you recognize right away because there's certain patterns, there's certain words that the LLM uses. So
Mhm.
now you're creating a monoculture where all these security tools are using essentially the same LLMs to defend, and then all you have to do is know these patterns and be able to exploit that and say, okay, I'm just going to circumvent that because I know exactly what these tools are using.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think an interesting place for people to research and explore is like I think this is kind of like a game theory thing, but if we have, red team LLM or we know that the bad guys are using it in the wild and we have our defensive LLM or system, maybe it's an automated SOC, right? Why don't I just stick those things together and run it all the time continuously? And it's like this one's writing really good social engineering emails and I'm actually sending them. This one's job is to catch those LLM written social engineered emails, right? And use that to kind of stay in touch with the speed of these things that might get really complex. But I think it's no different than a lot of the times we like to test our defenses, whether it's a pen test, a red team, or we use some type of like a breach and attack simulation tool, right? But now I think what we'll have is like LLM emulation with the goal of can we catch those things too? But I think using that conceptually will work, right?
Yeah, and do you think that eventually these tools will make things cheaper? So running a SOC today is very costly. There is almost like a bare minimum of $1 million. It's like how do you uh, how do you run a how do you create a two like $1 million SOC business? You start with two. You
Yeah.
start with 2 million. Uh, so do you think these AI tools are going to make it like more efficient or inexpensive? And then should these providers, all these MSSPs are using, uh, providing this as a service, SOC as a service, which is really popular. Should they disclose the fact that they're using AI tools, or should they just keep it completely black box to the customer?
Yeah. So two questions there. I guess for the first one, yeah, I mean, the way I've seen it and look at the real world impact is because LLMs or AI are helping us offload a lot of the manual work that us experts will do. Like the savings there, I guess if you want to tie it to the bottom line, it's going to be, if I have two full-time engineers or employees that are doing this work a month, I have both of them plus an AI right now, and it saves them 70% of their time. Okay, that's great because it's 70% extra free time for them. Um, it's not really saving you money in the sense that, uh, you know, it's going to be tied to labor. I think is what I'm saying. It's like by augmenting your workforce, you're trying to make one or two people the equivalent of three to five, right? So it's giving everybody a lever that they can use to increase the scale and the speed of their work. But I would be curious to know if you tie that back to, hey, we got a SOC, it's ten people in there. They spend this amount of hours after we've got this AI assisted tool, or gave it to them to use. They have 50% extra free time. Now they can go work on other projects or help out in other areas of the organization, right? But I think that's what it's
Or
going to come down to,
or
right?
Dylan, maybe they're 50% better. Maybe they provide a much
Exactly.
more accurate prediction and much better recovery or
Yeah.
ability to protect the organization. So you're 50% better.
Yeah.
You should
Exactly.
have a,
Exactly.
remember those Intel inside? They should have an LLM inside
Yeah. Yeah.
trademark.
But yeah, I mean, it's yeah. If MDRs, MSSPs are using this, yeah, I mean, I think you got to treat it like any other third party. Like you got to want to know, are they using Anthropic or OpenAI? Are they using Bedrock, or are they running their own models? What models are those? How were they created? Right? I think it's like any other third party trust, right? But yeah, I don't. I think everybody should always know, especially because if you're getting a work product back from them and it was assisted or entirely created by AI, you want to know that, right? And I think we still need to keep the human in the loop, especially for things like that, right? So,
And are we risking a whole new generation of security practitioners that don't know what, tail dash 50 is, and
yeah,
they
yeah,
only use LLMs, and so you're risking the fact that that's the amazing piece. You still have to have expertise when you're using these, but then you're creating a whole generation of kind of lazy practitioners where they rely heavily on that, and they don't actually have the underlying understanding. I think I saw like some I don't know if it was a meme, but somebody said, "Oh, I'm a prompt engineer," and then they ask him, "Okay, well, what's GitHub?" Or like, and they didn't know
yeah,
because they call themselves engineer, but they're just strictly like LLM users.
yeah. I think that's going to be tough and hard to avoid. Yeah, like if you like imagine somebody who enters the security field, today or 10 years from now, and I imagine their whole SOC must heavily augmented with all these AI tools. That's great, but like just like a funny example, like if one of them breaks one day and it's like, oh man, you got to do this investigation manually, bro. Good luck. And you're like, I have no idea. But I think we need to be careful with that, especially as, yeah, like a perfect example is you might use Claude or ChatGPT to do something, right? And we're going to get to a point where we kind of like mindlessly take that information as good or good enough. So I'm just going to use it. I'm just going to copy paste it. But there's no one forcing you to go and examine those results, slow down, read it, whether it's code or whatever, right? I think we need to
Dylan,
be
it's
to
like
be
that
careful with
lawyer.
that.
Do you remember that lawyer who came out
Oh,
with
there's
two
that story, right?
two
Yeah, what was
legal
the
cases?
story?
They were not exempt.
Okay.
Well, he came to the court, and I guess he uses legal cases. They were hallucinations. There were no actual legal cases like that. So it was
Oh,
basically
right. Yeah,
the
yeah, I
engine
remember.
was
Yeah.
making these up, and they came to they came presented into court. So
Yep. Perfect example.
it was yeah, perfect example. So what's the I guess the knowing that's the risk, and it's I think a pretty substantial risk of creating a whole new generation of people, defenders that are relying heavily on these tools but don't have the underlying knowledge. And just like I remember growing up, they would not allow me to use a calculator, and now they do. I mean, most schools do. So maybe
Mhm.
like we just say, okay, let's embrace it and just use LLMs, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna try to be not biased and partial here in my pro
Go ahead.
AI card, but yeah, like I'm trying to think like yeah, I mean, the last mile is with us, right? Because we're using the AI, we're taking it, we're going to do something with it, whether it's at work or personal, and you're the one who's going to be at risk for the hallucination. Like the difference I'm trying to think is if you go out and like even with the lawyer example, you're looking up real world cases or you're using a search engine like Google and you're pulling up articles or pieces of information that humans have written. I guess like it's not the same as hallucination in that it's just factually not correct at all versus like some sources on the web or some sources in the lawyer's library, whatever, might be more reputable or accurate than others. But you're the one, the human, who's making that thing. So yeah, I mean, as far as responsibility goes, I think it's got to end with the human, right? So like we have this great technology at your disposal. I totally think people should use it, but we do have to be careful about. It's like going to be up to your judgment, and then that gets to the relationship of the organization. Like, are we going to block ChatGPT because we don't want them to be using a third-party inference provider, period, or are we going to give them a local one, encourage them to use it? But I think there just needs to be guardrails, paved roads in place for like where people are using this technology that's going to have the likelihood of impact and be pretty risky. So I think that's how we navigate this is like, but ultimately it's got to be the responsibility of the human. Like I could be here doing my day job all the time and everyone's like super happy, it's great. And I was like, oh, joke's on you guys, I was using AI the whole time. And 6 months later, it's like, oh man, we found out that, but yeah, you got to be the one who's determined. You're the human, you're the expert. This is hallucination. You got to check. But I think guardrails will help, stuff like that. Yeah,
And
it's hard.
speaking of guardrails, what about the fact that if using public LLMs, anything that you input may show up somewhere else? And it's somebody that's close to me said that, well, the LLMs are like a baby, like a toddler. They're always listening, and then they may spit out the information somewhere else completely randomly, because you can ask a LLMs to give you a sample of a credit card number, and they may potentially just give you a real credit card that they grab from somebody else's input. And so there's risk associated there. How do companies, and how do you think we can solve this particular issue?
Yeah, I mean, you got to treat it like any other third party. I mean, I would ask someone, do you use Gmail? Do you use, Chrome on your phone, whatever app, right? What information are you giving them? I think we just have to treat it like that. And I know like a natural step is, knowing where your data is going and why. And so like perfect example is, yeah, I mean, maybe don't use the third party inference providers like Anthropic or Gemini. Okay, let's go do like an Amazon Bedrock, or I think Google has Vertex or whatever the Azure equivalent is for OpenAI, right? So now we're down to the trusted infrastructure. They're hosting the model, and I'm pretty sure the way it works is they'll take like the Anthropic or the OpenAI model, and they'll do like a one-way write, or they'll at least place it and host it in the trusted infrastructure. So now your data is going to that trusted infrastructure, but the model is immutable in the sense that it's a black box. The weights don't change. We're not tampering or touching the model, right? It's data going in and out. But then you got to look at, well, in your company, who's using the data there, right? Like, did the HR person put their thing in there? So there's still issues. And then, but as far as like, if we keep a simple example, like the organization is going to get complex. Enterprises are complex, lots of different data, lots of different places. I think there's already a lot of work that's been done there, but the personal sense, like you don't want to put in, your personal information in ChatGPT on your phone or your family or your friends or whatever. Yeah, the local models I've heard are pretty good. They're getting better and better. Like Ollama, the one you can install on your laptop. I'm sure there's a way you can do it on your phone, but then the data is never leaving your device, right? And then we could talk about encryption at rest and all that stuff. But yeah, I think going through those motions, and then I know I try to push people towards like Grok, Groq, that Grok. They're an inference provider, so like the text or the prompts, the data that you're sending the model, and the data you get back is ephemeral, so it's thrown out, right? They're not storing them. I think Bedrock uses that as well, but at the end of the day, it's kind of similar to, hey, am I trusting this VPN provider says they don't save my logs? You're like, So yeah, if you want to, you can totally. Something I want to try is like host like one of the open source models, like Llama, on bare metal or like on an infrastructure provider. See how much it costs. See how performant it is. That way, you're controlling your data. Like imagine you have your own private network and just host it there. But yeah, going through those steps and figuring out which one checks all the boxes or makes you more comfortable, right? But
Yeah, and if you remember, these used to sell, or still do sell, these bracelets that says, "In case of death, please delete my Google search history." So maybe they should have one of these like please delete my ChatGPT project.
Yeah, 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 100%. Yeah,
You heard
it's
that
funny.
here
No,
first.
yeah, I mean, the way that we use it, all the chats are saved in there, and I know when they released their memory feature, I don't know if you've had experience with this. I think it was default checked on, but some of it was cool. It's like, oh, I remember what I was talking about 2 days ago. Now I don't have to retype that whole paragraph
And
in.
you,
Great, but then you go and read it, and
yeah,
you're like, wow, it knows
yeah,
my weight, it knows my, I
everything.
don't know what kind of
And you can
questions you
ask
ask
it.
it, right?
Yeah, and you can
Yeah.
ask it what does it know. And in fact, I think some of the tools encourage you to tell it a little bit about yourself, so it can tell or can results associated with depending on
Mhm.
who you are, what do you do, and what are you expecting. So, and it's super interesting. So, Dylan, we're running out of time, but what exciting new stuff you're working on? Because I know you're very active on LinkedIn and you're posting a lot of stuff and you're giving back to the community. Tell me a bit about the stuff that you're working on and maybe how the best of people get involved or get in touch with you.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah. If you're interested in the chat, just message me on LinkedIn. That's typically where I hang out. So I guess a lot of the stuff that I write about or post is around applying LLMs to cybersecurity, to our domain, right? Yeah, I guess if you put it in like two buckets, there's security for AI, right? And then there's AI for security. So I'm more of the latter option, but those are kind of the two big spheres that our worlds are we're operating in right now. But yeah, um, we just started early stage cybersecurity company. It's going to be tapping on a lot of the same themes that we've talked about here. I'm pretty excited. So my background's being a SecOps practitioner, detection engineer, threat hunting, all that stuff, right? It's going to be in that space, a lot of the problems in that space. But yeah, just stay tuned on LinkedIn. We're going to release a lot of stuff on what we're working on shortly, make some announcements. But yeah.
Super exciting. The whole space has always been exciting. And I think that now it's like a hockey stick excitement
Yeah,
because
yeah.
there's just so much going on and almost like a daily basis. Uh, so Dylan, thank you very, very much. It's been a really phenomenal conversation. Thank you for joining me today. Thanks for all those who joined me. And until then, I'll see you in the next episode and be safe online as well as offline. Thank you,
Awesome.
Dylan.
Thanks, David. Cheers.
Thank you very much.